This is Chapter 8 on political parties for AP Government. In this chapter, we will learn about the role of political parties in the American democratic political system. We will begin by identifying the functions that political parties form and determine the significance of party identification for Americans today. Next, we will discover how parties are organized and see how good they are at fulfilling their promises. Then we will take a look back at different party eras in American history and consider the role and impact of third parties. Finally, we will evaluate advantages and disadvantages of political parties. So what does party mean? What does party mean? The purpose of political parties, frankly, is just to win elections. That is the point. Parties seek to control the government, and that's their entire function, to win elections and control the government. Political scientists think about parties in three ways. They look at the party and the electorate, which is the party's membership. It's very easy in this country to be a member of a party. You don't pay dues, you aren't obliged to officially register as a party member or to work on campaigns. You aren't even obligated to vote for your party's candidates. You can vote for whoever you want. You simply have to say you're a member of the party in the United States. The party as an organization comprises the party's national, state, and local offices and their staff's budgets and rules. So it's like the business structure of the party as an organization. The three levels, national, state, and local, and then their staff budgets and rules. And then finally, the party in government consists of elected officials who call themselves party members. Officials are not obliged to vote with their party and may sometimes vote with the opposition. But party leaders are the main spokespeople for the parties and sometimes try to enact their party's policy promises into law. Some of the things that parties do are listed here. In a large democracy, citizens rely on linkage institutions to indicate their policy preferences to government. Linkage institutions include political parties. And to serve effectively as linkage institutions, parties must pick candidates to run for office under the party banner. Party leadership used to nominate candidates, but now the party membership votes for nominees in primary elections. Parties must help coordinate their nominees' political campaigns, although personal campaign organizations are increasingly replacing the role of parties in this capacity. So Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have their own campaign organizations that are independent from their political parties, although the political parties also help support and run the national campaigns. Parties are still important, though, because they give cues to voters as to the liberal or conservative policy preferences of the candidate. Parties also provide this shortcut in part because they have platforms that articulate a list of the party's policy goals. So they give cues to voters. If you see an R by a candidate's name, then you know they're a Republican. Even if you don't know anything about that candidate, you should have an idea of the types of things they support, their ideology. Same thing if there's a D, a Democrat by their name, you have an idea of what that means. Finally, parties coordinate policymaking between the executive and legislative branches of government, and executives and legislators look for support from their fellow party members, and they expect their support on legislation that they want to get passed. So, how do voters make choices? And in theory, parties compete like businesses for voter support. Only the products that they sell are candidates and policies. And so some political scientists use a rational choice model to explain the relationship among citizens, parties, and policy. They assume that the actors are rational and make decisions to sensibly pursue goals. One such political scientist was Anthony Downs, and the Downs model is here. And Downs argues that voters want their favored policies to be enacted by government and parties want to get elected. So parties will adopt popular policies to maximize their chances of winning votes. And since most voters are moderate, parties will cluster around the center of the political spectrum. Yet parties also must distinguish themselves enough from each other to win loyal adherents. And to do this, they position themselves just to the left and right of center. So basically, parties will position themselves as close to the middle as they can so they can get the widest number of voters. But at the same time, in order to get their party's backing, they have to be slightly to the right or to the left. Usually that's what happens. Okay? So they seek loyalty by positioning themselves to the left if they're Democrats and to the right of center if they are Republicans. But again, most voters are moderate. Here's a figure that just shows the Downs model and how rational parties position themselves near but not quite at the center of public opinion. So the General Social Survey regularly asks a sample of the American population to classify themselves on a 7-point scale from extremely liberal to extremely conservative. And as illustrated in these graphs, and there's going to be another one on the next slide, both political parties regularly face the challenge of positioning themselves relatively close to the median voter, in particular to appeal to independents, because they have to have independent voters support their candidates in order to win. While at the same time, they have to be responsive to the position of their own base of supporters. And so if you look up here, it says the majority of Americans place themselves close to the middle of the liberal conservative spectrum as shown below in the top, right? And then it says both parties need to appeal to independents, the crucial swing voters who are especially likely to be centrist. So the next one is, the top, it's the Americans. Then it shows you this next one is independents. And you see the huge spike in the middle. They tend to be very much centrist. Now here you see at the top where the Democratic Party membership tends to lie. And you see that they are pretty much middle and then left, right? That's what their bulk is. And so they have to find that spot where they are appealing to those independent voters that are in the middle, but don't lose the people to the left. And then the Republicans, the bottom, are the exact opposite. Isn't that really interesting? So they have to appeal to the middle also without losing the far right. And so both the parties have an extremely difficult time. And in this particular election, this election with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, they are really struggling trying to find that happy medium. So in order to get out the vote, political parties have to cater to their most enthusiastic and active supporters. That would be liberals for the Democrats and conservatives for the Republicans. In the Republican side, you also have this group called Tea Party activists, this is a picture of one that is in a 18th century period costume, attending an annual conservative political action conference. And these Tea Party advocates they advocate a strict adherence to the U.S. Constitution, and they've been really, really visible inside the Republican Party. And so while they want to, again, the party wants to appeal to the middle as much as possible so they can get as many independent voters as possible, they also have to keep people like Tea Party activists happy. And that's been a real struggle for a lot of Republicans. Party membership in America is a psychological label. Voters think they know what each party stands for, and they choose an affiliation based on which party is closer to their preferences. The self-proclaimed preference for one party or the other is called party identification. So you just say, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. Polls have traced party identification over time, and two patterns have emerged in recent decades from these polls. First, more Americans now identify as Republicans than Democrats, and more Americans, 44% in 2012, call themselves independents, especially younger citizens. Independents claim to vote for the person, not the party, and are more likely than partisans to engage in ticket splitting, which means they'll vote for some Republicans and some Democrats at the same time. So here you can see a graph that shows the trend in party identification in the U.S. from 1952 to 2012. And political analysts and scholars carefully monitor these changes in the distribution of party identification. And so you can see that the percentage of the population that is identified as Democrats, Independents, and Republicans have been shifting. So you can see that where the Republicans are and the Independents are really growing. So the party organization really is a very hierarchical structure. There are local, state, and national party organizations. And the parties, though, are highly decentralized and fragmented, though. So while they technically have these three levels, they really are very separate. They work together on some things, but in other ways, they're very independent. From the late 19th century until at least the New Deal era, the urban political party was the main party organization, so a city-based political party on the local level. And the party's effectiveness at getting out the vote came from that so-called party machines that you might have learned about in U.S. history, the most famous, of course, being in Chicago and New York. You also had strong party machines in Boston. And these party machines rewarded voters for their support in a variety of ways. Patronage was a key inducement used by party machines. So jobs were given to contributors not based on merit or competence. They were based on whether or not you supported the party. So in New York and Chicago, they had the best known and most corrupt political machines. And at its height, the Democratic political machine in Chicago dispensed 40,000 patronage jobs, the recipients of which were expected to deliver at least 10 votes each on election day, and to kick back 5% of their salary in the form of a donation to the local Democratic Party. So think about that. The Democratic Party in Chicago gave out 40,000 jobs in exchange for 10 votes and 5% of your salary. That is really interesting. So progressive reforms that made jobs merit-based and government contracts subject to bidding, so competition, pretty much ended this patronage system. So that was part of the progressive movement, was to end that system. At the state level, the state party organizations vary in their levels of organization and funding. States get to decide certain rules related to voting, such as whether to hold open or closed primaries, whether to allow one-punch straight ticket voting, whether to list party candidates in a single column or randomly on ballots, and these rules make a big difference in voter behavior. State parties are increasingly establishing permanent headquarters, and their job is to provide technical assistance with campaigns, since candidates usually have their own campaign organizations. So they help them with mailing and some of the marketing and organizing people, like technical aspects of the party. At the national level, each party has a national convention that meets every 4 years to formally nominate the party's presidential candidate and to revise the party platform. The National Committee operates between the conventions during those 4 years from convention to convention, and is led by the national chairperson, who hires the staff, raises money, pays bills, and attends the daily day-to-day running of the party. The party chair sometimes uses this position as a means of political advancement for themselves.